2018 Township meeting. If we could all please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you could please silence all your cell phones and other devices. A friendly reminder that audience members may be audio or video recorded by third parties, since this is a public meeting. I'd like to move to item number 4 on the agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, approximately a year and a half ago, our community first learned of a terrible, tragic event, the murder of Bianca Roberson. A bright, young, wonderful woman whose promising adult life was just getting started. Her death was every parent's nightmare, so our thoughts and prayers were with her and her family, as they are now, and as they always will be. Our community reacted with love and support, and our police force, I believe the finest police force in the region, worked diligently night and day in conjunction with the District Attorney's Office and the Chester County Detective's Office. And they helped apprehend her killer and bring him to justice. We're here today to witness and recognize and give thanks to those who have helped, through their hard work, bring about some closure to Bianca's family, and her friends and her community. And with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce District Attorney Tom Hogan for the award presentation. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor, I'd like everybody who worked on the case, come on up here, stand in the back. You know who you are. All right, this is the District Attorney's commendation to the West Goshen Police Department for their outstanding work in the investigation, arrest, and conviction of David Desper for the murder of Bianca Roberson. If I showed you an ocean of needles, nothing but needles, a full ocean of them, and told you to find me one needle, could you do it? Could you find me one needle in an ocean full of needles? Because that's what happened here. Let me tell you the story. One day, I got a report that a young lady died in a traffic accident on the Route 100-202 merge. And the report was just that. It was an accident. Maybe her foot slipped onto the gas instead of the brake, and she drove off, hit a tree, and died. And you know, law enforcement deals with a lot of tragedies. So when you hear something like that, you say a quick prayer, and you move along. 24 hours later, I'm sitting in a meeting in the DA's office with our command staff and Chief of Staff Chuck Gazzett, the one that looks like Bigfoot back there, picked up his phone and said, "Yep, what? That was the call that told us that they had pulled a bullet from Bianca Roberson's skull. That this was not a tragic accident, that this was a murder." And you know, all we had to go on was the fact that there was a red pickup truck in the vicinity seen swerving right after that car went off the road. A red pickup truck. That is all we had. And one of the West Goshen detectives said, "This is going to be like finding a needle in a haystack." And Chuck Gazzett, Chief of Staff, said, "It's not going to be like finding a needle in a haystack. This is going to be like finding a needle in an ocean full of needles." Because do you know how many red pickup trucks there are in the tri-state region with nothing else to work on? But the West Goshen Police Department, the detectives and the prosecutors from the DA's office did not hesitate. They didn't stop. They just went to work. We started with red pickup trucks. And then we went and we pulled up every video we could. We started with the PennDOT videos right up there on 100 and 202 and got a picture of that red pickup truck. We knew he got off somewhere on 202, but that was somewhere between up here and Route 95. So they checked video at every place he could have gotten off. Think about that. Every business, every home where he could have gotten off, we checked until they found where he got off and started following where he went. And he went right past this police station. And then what did we have? We had a very rough sketch of somebody who saw that it was a white male with somewhat wavy hair. And so we put that information out. Now you begin to see what we were doing. Chief Gleason and I talked about it. We were going to put pressure on this guy. Let him know that the noose was tightening. That sketch wasn't all that good. If you saw the defendant and the sketch, you would think it wouldn't look anything like him. But what we knew is when he saw the sketch, he would think, that kind of looks like me. This could be trouble. And then they kept checking videos. Now think about this. They had to check videos at every house and every business along every place that he could have gone. Every single place, looking for that one needle in an ocean of needles. And what did they start to develop? They started to develop where he had gone. We got a better picture of that red pickup truck. We put it out on social media. The announcement, what we eventually came to, happened right here. But we put it out on social media. West Goshen did, we did, and we started to get tips in about that red pickup truck. And then we started to get it even closer. And what else did we have? You know, when something like this happens, it's not just law enforcement here who notices. The Delaware County detectives, Louis Grandizio, out of that one bullet that we found in Bianca Roberson, gave us the make, model, and caliber of the gun. Now we had another piece of information. And then we found a video that showed us the truck. Turned out to be just 1.5 miles from the defendant's home. The noose is closing. Now we had one other ace in the hole that I didn't even know about at the time. One of the tips that came in that we did not process yet was somebody calling in to tell us where the red truck had been tucked away. So that Friday, we got together, we put out the last picture of the truck 1.5 miles from the defendant's home. And our plan was to put out the gun information the following Monday. And when that weekend, we were saying to ourselves, 48 hours, 72 hours, we will have this guy. We will have the needle in the ocean of needles. And that Saturday night, late that Saturday night, his attorney called and said, you guys have him. I'm going to turn him in. And you know, he never told us why he did it. Even to this day, what he said at the sentencing hearing wasn't the truth. He said he was afraid. Even the judge said, no, you weren't. You were angry. In a lot of places in the United States, this never would have been solved because this was looking for a needle in an ocean of needles. And the West Goshen Police Department and the Chester County detectives solved this crime, tracked him down, and made sure that he was arrested, convicted, and went to jail. And you know, as tough as these cops are, as hard as they are, there is not a single one of them who has not cried over the course of this case. Cried with the family, in private, cried at the sentencing hearing when Rodney Roberson and Michelle Roberson got up and poured out their sorrow for the loss of their daughter. So Chair Pielli, I agree with you. This is one of the finest police departments in the region and in the United States. All of the supervisors of West Goshen, you should be proud of the men and women of the West Goshen Police Department. It is our pleasure to work with them, and it is my pleasure to give this award, a District Attorney's Commendation, to Chief Gleason for this outstanding work.
Mr. Hogan, thank you so very much. This was certainly a team effort. The folks that you see up here, there was a lot more involved in this investigation. Half of your office who was not here this evening was involved in this as well. It was a shock to the community, to say the least, but we all came together, your prosecution team, Michelle, Chris, they were phenomenal. I'll be honest with you, this started with a photograph from a PennDOT camera that we taped in our dispatch center. And that's what gave us the beginning of this. And I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for giving us the resources to be able to find that needle in this haystack. And the detective unit, they literally walked Paoli Pike, knocking door to door, down 352 into Delaware County. They were literally walking the line. So when you say that this was an all-team effort and they really had boots on the ground, literally, they really had boots on the ground. So on behalf of the West Goshen Police Department, thank you to Chief Dykes and the Chester County Detectives, Mr. Hogan, the DA. We will proudly hang this in our lobby. Thank you very much. Sir.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we be excused.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
You got a photo up outside?
Yes, photos outside.
Everyone, don't be alarmed, you can smell a little bit of wood smoke. It's the neighbor's chimney. For some reason, when they have a fire, prevailing winds take it right over to our HVAC unit and bring it into the building. So don't be alarmed. It's just normal. It's okay. The fire marshal's here. Everything's fine. That's right. He's near the fire. Okay, folks. Moving right along. Item number 5. Mariner 2 12-inch repurposed line AccuFax report presentation by Mr. David Broom. Mr. Broom.
It does not appear that my mic is working, so if you can't hear me, please signal, make a face, raise your hand, whatever. Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman, members of the audience. My name is Dave Berman. I work with the firm of High Schwartz in Norristown, and I've been Special Environmental Counsel, Special PUC Counsel to the board since 2014, overseeing the Mariner East project, and many of the issues that have been presented in West Goshen Township, and
You might use the mic.
no, you want me to come up there?
Yeah, there's no power to it.
You want me to go up there?
No.
So there was a proceeding, just by way of background for some that are not familiar with the full proceedings, and I will try to make it brief because it's long. There was a proceeding in 2014 before the Public Utilities Commission. On behalf of West Goshen Township, we retained an expert by the name of Richard Kupowitz with AccuFax out of Washington State. Richard was a renowned expert in the area of energy safety, having been in the industry for 40 years. And that led to a settlement because of information we obtained in discovery information Richard reviewed pursuant to a non-disclosure agreement. And to give you an idea of his credentials, because we've relied on him a lot as the legal counsel for the board, and the board's relied on him a lot. He provides specialized technical and safety expertise in the pipeline industry. He's worked in all different sectors, and he looks at siting and design, operation, maintenance, emergency management procedures, regulatory requirements, and he has a particular expertise in high volatile liquids, which is what Sunoco is putting into its Mariner East pipelines. He's an engineer by education. He has an MBA, but importantly, he's also a member, an appointed member of the federal agency known as PHMSA, which is the agency that looks over basically the industry and provides regulation and guidance, and is basically on the cutting edge of that. Also, Richard is hired now, having been in the industry for 40 years, by many public agencies and governmental entities to investigate ruptures, releases, spills, and leaks of all natures, including high volatile liquids. So if you see something in a newspaper of an explosion in West Virginia, or the one recently in Pittsburgh, chances are Richard's investigating that on behalf of either PHMSA or some other agency. So all of that led to a series of protocols between Sunoco and West Goshen that are embedded in a settlement agreement that was entered into in April of 2015. And in that agreement, which is on the township's website, there's Appendix 5, and that was Richard's initial safety report on Mariner East 1, and it's dated May 6 of 2015. The settlement agreement also set forth a protocol for Richard and Accufax to investigate what became known as Mariner East 2. And that has morphed into a lot of iterations, but Mariner East 2 at the time in 2015 was a 20-inch pipeline and a 16-inch pipeline to run parallel to move product from the western part of the state to the eastern part of the state for export and use here in the United States. That ended up being broken up into Mariner East 2, the 20-inch line, and Mariner East 2X, the 16-inch line. Settlement agreement permitted West Goshen and Accufax to evaluate the safety of each of those lines, which in turn led to a report that was released January 6 of 2017 in regard to Mariner East 2. And the report for Mariner East 2X, the 16-inch line, has not been prepared because that line is not fully designed. Indeed, in connection with an action that was initiated last year and tried last year to enforce portions of the settlement agreement which were breached by Sunoco, it became clear that there were aspects that were looked at in regard to the 20-inch line, Mariner East 2, which have changed, especially in regard to something very, very important, the safety of the line, and that's the valve placement. So there'll be a supplement to that being issued by Richard, but the purpose of tonight's meeting, with that as background, is to give you a report on a new line, which is what I call a detour. But Mariner East 2 and Mariner East 2X is probably 3 years in delay because of regulatory problems, permitting problems, enforcement problems, litigation. So because they need to get product to market, in July of this year they announced, they being Sunoco and their now parent company Energy Transfer, that they were going to repurpose a new line known as the 12-inch line, and they were going to connect it to the 20-inch line of Mariner East 2 up in Warwick Township on the western part of the state, and on the eastern part of the state connected to the 16-inch line, ME2X, and that's in Middletown Township. So a 24-mile segment of a 12-inch line that was moving fuel and diesel and jet fuel from the east to the west is now being repurposed, and in fact is now in operation from the western part of the state, BoS Township, the eastern part of the state. So they have continuity, and that'll be used for the period of time it takes them to get up and running on ME2. So we asked, pursuant to a settlement agreement, to again review the integrity of that pipeline as it pertains to West Goshen Township. And I think that's an important part of understanding exactly what Mr. Kubrowitz has done. The township is very concerned, of course, with the safety of its residents, and it has limited its review, its scope, if you will, to the area that could impact West Goshen Township. The pipeline runs roughly a mile, a little more than that through West Goshen. Richard's review extended slightly greater distance because, as you will hear in my presentation, what's integral to Richard's analysis is where are the valves, God forbid something happens, above or below West Goshen Township. The valves being the shutoff points. So if you can picture a spigot running water, there are valves that are roughly 7.5 miles apart. Some are a little greater, some are a little less, and they are integral to the safety of the residents of West Goshen to ensure that they're placed in such a manner as to be able to shut this pipeline down in the event of an emergency. So that's what Richard looked at. He did not look at the full 350 miles of this pipeline. He simply looked at the 12-inch line as it pertains to the 1 mile plus that could impact West Goshen Township. This line will move about 150 to 160 million barrels of butane and propane a day. It is a rough alignment with the 8-inch line. So for those familiar with what's called the Boot Road pump station, it runs through the pump station in West Goshen, but does not utilize the pump station. It purely is an underground line. The nearest pump station is 72 miles upstream in Londonderry Township, Dauphin County. Richard studied the pipe integrity and process safety management systems which could impact West Goshen. That included, number one, validating the pipeline integrity, which is how safe is the pipe in terms of its welds, in terms of its age, in terms of its corrosion protection, and any irregularities that may have resulted from construction around the pipeline over the years. He also looked at the possible threat evaluation to the pipeline in terms of where it's located and what threats there are. He looked at the design and the operation, the mainline valve placement activation, which I mentioned, control room release detection and monitoring, which are basically the standard operating procedures that govern the control operators and exactly what is done in the case of irregularities and or emergencies. And then lastly, the automatic and emergency response shutdown and planning procedures. I don't know the degree of detail you want me to get into each one of them, but I think a few points are pretty important. Number one, Richard looked at two aspects of the testing that was performed by Sunoco to ensure the integrity of the line, i.e. it hasn't corroded. This line was built in 1937. It's a seamless steel, what's known as grade B pipe. So one of the integral parts, of course, is to ensure that they have adequately tested this line so that there's no thin parts, if you will, from corrosion that would exist, in rusting your car, for example. They do that two ways. One is through a pipeline test, and the second is through hydrostatic testing. So in other words, before they put product through, they actually put water through and run it at 125% of its operating, maximum operating process in terms of and they determine whether or not there are any irregularities, and what the strength test is. That revealed that 55% of the pipeline has actually been replaced in West Goshen Township due to irregularities they saw during the testing. They also did a spike test for 8 hours. And the unique part about the 12-inch line, even greater than the 8-inch line review, was that they did the inline testing with what's called the Smart Pig and the hydrotonic testing both in 2017 and 2018. So 4 separate tests for all intents and purposes. That was all consistent with both PUC and federal regulation, and in fact exceeded regulation, but was consistent with what would be considered safe practices in the industry. In terms of the automatic placement, here we have a situation where it's 6 miles upstream. We have a valve block at Boot Road and 4 miles downstream. So it's a lot better than the normal 7.5 mile placement. So the locations were reasonable. One of those, like we found in the 8-inch investigation, was a manual shutdown, not an automatic shutdown. So Richard went back to Sunoco, recommended that be changed to an automatic shutdown valve. So now all 3 of the valves that protect West Goshen, if you will, are automatic shutdown system valves. Like he did for the 8-inch report and 12-inch report, he looked at the leak detection automatic system shutdowns. These are basically computer automatic system logic procedures, algorithms, which basically prevent human error. So they're looking at the line pressures to see if there's any release, because a large release is going to be seen and known immediately, and procedures go in place. But some of the leaks, frankly, are a little more subtle, and they're picked up by computer logic as opposed to human error. Those are consistent and exceed industry standards, and he felt comfortable that if there's any leak in the area of West Goshen, those 3 valves are going to shut down, the system will shut down, preventing releases to the atmosphere. So in conclusion, he found that the integrity was appropriate based on the testing, and that the line and its integrity management systems, placement of the valves, valve actuation, overpressure protection, pipeline monitoring, control room procedures, leak detection, and automatic pipeline system shutdown all met and exceeded federal pipeline safety regulations. It also has the new information for the supervisors, and I think you've been made aware by your township manager. He and I have communicated closely since Friday. The Public Utility Commission has cited Sunoco for some alleged violations of, in one case, federal regulation, in another case, appropriate protocols for testing the integrity of the line through the Smart Pig. Not here in the Chester County area, but in an area that was subject to a release. It was in 2017. Some of that data, frankly, is disturbing if proven true, and would, really be worth the PUC investigating not just the area which was subject to the release, but also areas in and around the entire pipeline. I went back to our consultant. He's re-reviewed the data, and this had to do with the 8-inch line. Re-reviewed the data that was given to him back in 2015, asked some additional questions to Sunoco, and with respect to both the Smart Pig and hydro testing that was reviewed at the time, is comfortable that that information was accurate. The facts are different than what happened in Morgantown, than what testing was performed here in Chester County. So we will be closely monitoring this case, communicating with your supervisors. And Richard will be monitoring it to make sure that the information we've been provided and the series of reports that have been provided to the township and to the public are accurate. The information provided by Sunoco is accurate, and we will see what comes out of this PUC proceeding. So that's my report on the 12-inch line, the background that led into it, and the most recent development being the PUC complaint.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Any questions from board members? I just have one quick question. I remember the valve that was in Delaware County. We had a problem with Sunoco making that an automatic valve. There was a real delay. In fact, until we filed a suit, all of a sudden they automated it. Is there any indication as to how far they are with making this manual valve an Exton junction and changing it into, as we've requested before?
Yeah, I think we need for independent verification. I think that's absolutely correct. The line's just recently gone into operation, but Richard needs to independently verify that. That's what we did last time.
Sure.
They ended up submitting an affidavit to the Pennsylvania Utility Commissions, and we went out and verified that there actually was an automatic valve. I think that's appropriate protocol here as well.
Just based on their past history, I think that's something that we should follow up on.
I agree.
That's my only question. Any other questions from board members? Any questions from the audience? Mr. Casey? I'll remind everyone we have a 3-minute limit, but I am willing to give a 2-minute extension depending on the circumstances. With that said, Mr. Casey.
Good evening. So regarding this report, I was asked to submit questions in advance and topics of discussion, so I'd like to present this. This is a printout of what I sent to you guys already. So I'd also like to present 2 letters to the board. These are letters that the county commissioners both sent to PEMA and to the Utility Commission, calling into question Sunoco's providing or false, not providing information. So at this point, with regards to this being a West Goshen issue, it is absolutely a West Goshen issue because the testing that Sunoco provided and the information in this complaint by the Bureau of Investigations clearly shows that the testing was from Twin Oaks to Montello, which would incorporate West Goshen. So the information and details that they provided for Mr. Kublowitz, for the AccuFacts reports, is suspect. Everything that anyone has done to this point over the last 5 years, because this report also discusses a 5-year period of time, which would incorporate when the board was negotiating with Sunoco, that they may have done a preemptive breach of some kind with regards to negotiating in bad faith, much like they did with the valve station on the Janik property next to the firehouse. So Sunoco has misbehaved for at least a 5-year period as alleged by the Bureau and their investigation that took from April of 2017 until May of 2018 is how long that went on for. So I guess what was very important, what stuck out to me, and why the township really needs to reevaluate everything they're doing with regards to this Sunoco problem. One is the settlement agreement prevents you from questioning the safety with regards to these projects. You can do what you're doing with AccuFacts, but you can't call it into question. Well, this report from the Bureau, for the sake of I'm going to call this Bureau for now, has done something which is very unique that has never been done before. No one's questioned the integrity of the 12-inch line, and the 12-inch line was never part of the negotiations originally for the settlement. But this complaint has now tied the 8-inch into the 12-inch, so the integrity of the 12 and the integrity of the 8 are now one and the same. And in West Goshen Township, those two lines run within 3 feet of each other, outside of a 2,800 foot stretch, minimum 2,800 feet. So this also gave out technical details that were never known to the public regarding the cathodic protection. Now, the hydro tests that were done in Morgantown and the details that came from that clearly show that Sunoco was not providing information to regulators. They were not giving out all the details that were necessary to make judgments. They were also not telling, in 2017 in a report, their ILI, which is the pig test, they failed to acknowledge that there was corrosion in the line. They just didn't report it.
They'll be in control. It's 3 minutes. I'm going to give you another tip. Go ahead.
So at this point, anything that has to do with any information, reports, risk assessments, anything is now suspect, because we can't trust that the data that went into it to get the output is accurate. So I would urge the board to consider that when it's making its judgment. I would also urge the board, I guess, is the township going to intervene on the PUC Bureau complaint? Is the township going back to AccuFacts to discuss, which Mr. Bruman said they were? Will the township finally stand up and declare that the safety of the residents matter no matter the situation? And will the township consider a pipeline task force like the one created in East Goshen Township? We have the ability to do things that you can't, and you have the ability to do things that we can't. But if we work together, we can make sure that everything that we're learning is accurate and fact-based, not based in what they want us to know. So, and I would also like for the board to consider this as if this judgment comes out from the PUC and it's found that Sunoco is in violation of these federal codes, to consider that to be a second breach and get us out of this settlement, which prevents you from upholding your oaths of office to uphold health, safety, and welfare for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Do we have any other comments? Dr. White.
Good evening, Doug White, West Goshen Township. Just a quick question. Repurposed lines means there was a previous material going through the line, such as jet fuel and diesel, you said. Now it's going to be butane and propane. What's the procedure to clean these lines, and is there any risk of residual old fuel interacting with the new fuel and causing a problem? Thank you.
The lines are flushed before new product is put in, and so they're basically safe, and there's not a combustible mixture of material.
Okay, so they have a procedure to make sure no residual old stuff is. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Mr. Casey, just to answer your question, all of your options have been discussed. There's nothing off the table. I have personally no problem with a task force like East Goshen has. The other things, as far as intervention, we're keeping all of those options open with this new news. Mr. Kuperwitz is currently reevaluating some of the information that's just coming in. So we're going to be, I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to talk about it. All those options are open.
If I may, I do plan on intervening on that matter.
I heard. I wish you luck, and we may be there with you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, let me get through this report here, is number 6, and it's reports of the month. We have the police report presented by Chief Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For the month of November, West Goshen Police responded to 2,079 calls for service. We responded to 66 alarms, 4 of which were valid, investigated 41 reportable motor vehicle accidents and 64 non-reportable motor vehicle accidents, and we logged 17,740 miles on our patrol vehicles. Among other locations, selective enforcement was active on Applegate Drive, Ashbrook Drive, Ellis Lane, North Penn Drive, Phoenixville Pike, Sunset Hollow Road, and Taylorsboro Road. Career development continues. Officer Holman attended a CISM meeting, which is critical incident stress management. He's a part of the CISM team for Chester County. We had our monthly emergency response team training, which included explosive breach training for one of the officers. The department completed its qualifications for firearms training, and our Honor Guard did their monthly training as well. Detective Taylor attended a liaison officer conference in Hershey, which is coordinating with the Pennsylvania State Police with regard to criminal investigations. Our negotiator training, and Officer Grandizio and Officer Kenna attended standardized field sobriety testing. Officer Grandizio is an instructor, and it was the initial process for Officer Kenna. And that is it. I wish everyone a happy holiday.
Thank you, Chief. Next report is the Fire Marshal's report, including Goshen Fire Company and Good Fellowship Ambulance Company, presented by Fire Marshal Andrea. Good evening.
Good evening. For the month of November, there were a total of 28 calls, 7 commercial use and occupancy, 3 fire blocking, 14 sprinkler, 7 framing, 2 fire extinguisher placement, and 4 walkthrough. There were 5 fire calls, 4 automatic fire alarms, and 1 appliance fire. I attended to 2 complaints and attended 26 hours of training. The Westchester Fire Department had 27 calls for the month, and Good Fellowship Ambulance had 145 calls. Thank you.
Thank you. The next report is the Building Officials Report, presented by Building Official John Beswick. Good evening, John.
Good evening. For the month of November, there was a total of 69 permits, 16 building, 11 electrical, 4 fire protection, 11 HVAC, 10 plumbing, 3 roofing, 2 zoning, 8 use and occupancies, 1 E&S, and 3 road occupancies. The estimated cost of construction was $3,690,547, and the permit fees were $21,419.14. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Mr. Beswick. Now we're at item number 7, Board of Supervisors announcements. I will start to my left with Ms. Lasota.
I have no announcements today. Thank you. I have no announcements either.
Well, that makes the 3 of us. Likewise. Nothing from Mr. Purnell. All right. Moving on to number 8, Township Managers announcements. Mr. Casey Lalar.
Good evening, everybody. Just bear with me. My wife gave me a cold. Okay. At the start of the year, it was requested from the board to the staff to do a bank RFP. We did that in conjunction with an engineering RFP, which we discussed previously. I want to thank Ms. Jean Denham, our finance director. She produced a incredibly extensive, concise bank RFP and issued it to our depositories plus other institutions to see what the response would be. After receiving many responses, they were quickly whittled down. Actually, some or most did not even come close to meeting our requirements for the township. We had 2 leaders, TD Bank and Citizens Bank. Citizens Bank actually left the government banking sector years ago, and they've only been back for about a year. So that short-term time frame did not bode well for them. Without going into much more detail, TD Bank has met all the requirements of our bank RFP. So staff, myself, Ms. Denham, are recommending we continue with TD Bank as our main depository. We still have money in other banks, but smaller amounts, but TD is our main depository. They provide all the services that are required under our policies, and they provide very good service. So we're recommending we stick with TD. There's no action needed. They're not depository right now, so there's no action by the board needed at this time. Any questions?
Any question from any board members?
No, I would just like to thank Ms. Denham and all the other staff members and management that worked on the RFP. I understand it was a very cumbersome and time-consuming process, and I appreciate all the work that you've done.
Thank you very much. Casey, I did have a
Yes, of course.
I know we talked briefly, I know it's one of the banks we use.
Yes.
Might not be a large number.
Correct.
There was a discussion about BB&T, and they were not properly chartered in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Correct. Yeah, BB&T, they are a North Carolina bank. We've had multiple iterations from one end bank to First Chest. I mean, it goes back years. They've been acquired over years, as we all know. Before BB&T, I think it was Susquehanna. I'm sorry. Oh yes, First National Bank, of course. BB&T is only chartered in North Carolina. Our policy is they have not be chartered in Pennsylvania, as a Pennsylvania bank. So we're going to make a recommendation. We may make a recommendation in 2018. Unless they are become chartered in Pennsylvania, we may move the funds that we do have there out, just because they don't meet our requirements.
Approximately how much funds do we have?
About $4 million.
A little less than that.
Yeah, just maybe $3.5 million. Most of it's the retirement, post-retirement.
And liquid fuels money.
Correct. Correct.
So, for the edification of the audience,
Yes.
why is that important to have it chartered in Pennsylvania?
I'll defer to Ms. Dunn.
I don't know how important it is, but it's just one of our requirements that we require that they be chartered in Pennsylvania.
Anybody have an answer for that? I think I have an answer, but I'm not sure. So,
Okay.
having to do with the bank failure, so it occurs with bank failure in the laws of North Carolina, we have to seek jurisdiction to go there. But I might be wrong.
Sure.
But I think better safe than sorry, especially with our township employees' retirement money.
That's right.
Perhaps we should move it to a Pennsylvania charter bank.
There you go.
Okay.
Very good.
No other questions on that topic? Any questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Would that apply to personal banking as well, or just township banking?
This is township.
Oh, yeah, this is strictly for township funds. This has nothing to do with any individual accounts, strictly township funds.
I think for personal accounts would be FDIC, no matter what.
Right.
You would become.
And we collateralize all of our money, which means we're not covered under, we're covered under FDIC, but our banks collateralize our money. It's essentially an insurance policy in case the bank would go bankrupt. God forbid.
Dr. White?
Do we use Fulton or DMV at all?
I'm sorry, speak up.
Do we use Fulton or DMV at all?
Sewer Authority uses Fulton. We don't. We use DMV just a little bit, not a lot.
Any other questions? Okay, folks, moving right along to number 9, the township.
I'm sorry, I just have two more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, that's okay. Just some quick announcements. The annual reorganization meeting for 2019 will be at 5 p.m. January 7th. It's a little late for 2019. It's the first Monday of the first year, of the year, so it's the 7th.
5.
Would you like, we've had done it for 5 for 46 years, if you'd like to change
You
the
did
time.
last year, 5.
We did.
So we should do it again
We
this
did.
year.
You guys okay? It's a Monday too. Okay. So again, it's January 7th, a Monday at 5 p.m. for the reorg meeting. Our next regular board meeting will be January 15th at 7 o'clock. And then I was going to do it this month, but we got a little busy. As we've been discussing for months and months, we received a grant from the Commonwealth for frontline training. I'm going to do a presentation. I went to Texas, and more of us went to Oklahoma City for the second one, which was more interesting. I'm going to do a presentation on those two trainings. I was not allowed to participate in the first training because it was actual firefighter training. I'm not a firefighter. I just hosted. But staff and I, and about 19 of us went, staff members and others, to the Oklahoma City training. We received a 796-page training manual, which I will post. If not, I'll probably do it this week. I'm going to merge all 26 chapters into one giant document. I thought it was very good training, and I think we learned a lot. So I will be doing that on the 15th of January. That's it. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I think we should announce public executive session.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, we had an executive session to discuss litigation and litigation. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lalonde. Next item on the list is number 9, Township Engineers Stormwater Announcements. Mr. Rick Craig.
Mr. Chairman, on November 2nd, the township received a number of forms from DEP to be completed in order to accept the grants that we were awarded for the ME2 stormwater projects. Those forms were completed by staff and by our consultant and were submitted back to DEP by the deadline of December 7th. So we are in the process of accepting those 2 grants from DEP and hope to get started on that work early in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Next item on the agenda is item number 10, zoning officer's announcements. Mr. Bill Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Zoning Hearing Board did hold a hearing here last week on the 4th. We had 2 hearings before the board, one of which was Emily Rose Bakery at 315 West Town Road sought a variance, a special exception to be allowed to do 10%, have 10% of their floor area be retail, which is allowed by our zoning ordinance by special exception. The Zoning Hearing Board did grant that variance. The second application was for 21st Century Cyber Charter School. It was a 2-part hearing. Their first was to refute my letter saying that they could not operate an educational use within the I-1 zoning district because we do not allow educational uses within the I-1 zoning district. The second part of that hearing was if the Zoning Hearing Board was so inclined to feel that I was right within my jurisdiction to say that they could not operate an educational use within the I-1 zoning district, and indeed they were an educational use, they sought a variance to be allowed to do so. The Zoning Hearing Board did not render a decision on that matter and has tabled that decision to take place on January 9th, which leads me to our next topic. On January 9th, we will have 9 zoning hearings that evening. Volume, it's just volume. We have, Crown Castle has applied for 8 variances for DAS systems. Those of you who are not familiar, the DAS systems are used to incorporate more data. We're a heavy volume society, so these DAS systems work in conjunction with the main poles. So the system kind of takes the signals from here to there to move the signals around. They had previously met with us about 2 years ago, presented these to us. The township had no objection because of the placement. They're putting these in all industrial zoning districts. They're not proposing any residential zoning districts. So I don't anticipate that the board would want to object to that. We may want to have a presence at the hearing from council. The 9th hearing that we will have that night is Crown Castle has filed a validity challenge to our zoning ordinance for the wireless communications section as a whole. Now, I did speak with their counsel today, and I basically relayed that the township's position is that I don't believe we intend to fight the placement of these because we were in agreement before as to where these were going to go because there's no effect on residential properties. So he said that as long as there's no objection during the first hearing, he doesn't plan on pursuing the validity challenge in the zoning during the zoning hearing. So this would be the board's decision whether we're going to send council, and that decision can be made whenever you so choose to do so. So that's about all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item number 11. It is the approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of November 26, 2018 and December 4th, 2018. We have
Make a
a motion from Mrs. Selden. Second, Mr. Purnell. Before we have a vote, are there any comments on this agenda item? There are none. Okay. Motion, we have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Next item on the agenda, number 12, approval of the Treasurer's Report dated November 30th, 2018 for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we pay. And I'll second it.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any comments from the audience? Number 12. Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Number 13 is the possible adoption of Resolution 22-2018, adopting the 2019 General Fund budget, the Sewer Fund budget, the Waste and Recycling Fund budget, the State Highway Fund budget, and the Capital Reserve budget, and 5-year capital and budget projections. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make that motion. Oh, very good.
Well.
Okay, you got a first and a second.
Okay.
Pick one.
That was easy.
So, any comments from the audience? Dr. White?
Overall, it's a good budget. I just have a quick comment. The library funding at $20,000. It used to be $2,500, then it went to $5,000, and then it went to $20,000. I think in 15 or 14.
It was well before that.
Before that?
Yeah, that was so important. That was like 2011, 2012.
When it went to 20,000.
After many requests.
Okay. So just a quick comment. Sorry. I think the reasoning was it was to correspond to the rough population of the township. Okay, just some input. To reduce the funding to around $12,000 and split it between Exton and the borough. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. White. Any other comments? Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone who worked so hard on this budget. It really was a group effort. Special thanks, Gene, the gang down there. Thank you so much. Thank you to Mary and Robin and all the other supervisors, you. I believe each of you guys were the lead on that, and we all cooperated. Remember, we started out with a $2 million deficit, and we worked together to wheel it down so that our general fund is now approximately a $46,000 surplus. So, very happy to vote on this. Having said that, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda, number 14, the possible adoption of Resolution 23-2018, establishing the 2019 real estate tax at 2.0 mils. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Mr. Cornell, Mr. Meek, first and a second. This rate is the same.
10 years, absolutely.
10 years now, we've kept it the same. So, any comments from the audience? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is item number 15. It's the possible adoption of Resolution 24-2018, approving the revised minimum municipal obligation for the township's police administration and roads, sewer employees, pension plans. I will hand it over to Mr. Lalonde.
Yes, sir. As part of the 2019 budgets, the board put into place a 2% employee contribution. So back in September, the board adopted a previous resolution specifically for this does not affect the police pension plan at all. The 2% contribution is for the administrative and roads employees and sewer employees. And as you can see in the resolution, for example, the administrative and roads pension plan, the financial requirements are $459,000 and change, but the minimum municipal obligation has been reduced by that 2% contribution. So the minimum municipal obligation then is down to $399,000. So there's savings because we're contributing that to the pension. Same as for the sewer plan, we have financial requirements of $229,000, but the minimum municipal obligation is $200,000 because of the 2% contribution that is down. So that is the reason for the change, so we could input those numbers into the 2018 budget.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lalonde. Thank you. We have a motion. Mr. Purnell? I'll second. I have a second from Mr. Miko. Any comments from the audience? Questions? No. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. The next item on the agenda is going to be tabled. It's the discussion of ordinance amendment for the special events permitting requirements. We're going to table that item to January 15th, 2019, our next meeting. Moving on to number 17, discussion and possible approval of the bid for tri-polymer bids opened on November 7th, 2018. And Mr. Lavon, I'm going to hand that back to you.
Certainly. Mr. Moffitt's here from our wastewater plant, our wastewater treatment plant manager. Every year we do this and the liquid polyaluminum chloride. Those are the chemicals used during the treatment process. So we put this out for bid every year. The low bid this year for 15,000 pounds or more or less of dry polymer. And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys tested this material?
It's the same product we make.
Oh, good. It's the same product we've used. Excellent. The low bid is from George Coyne Chemical in Croydon, PA, at $2.368 per pound, and we recommend approval tonight.
Thank you. We do have a motion and a second, correct? No, we do not. I have a motion and a second.
Oh, motion.
Motion. We have a second, and we're just going to move on to the other item, do the bids, because Ms. Tomczyk.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
1 second. So maybe we can talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so similar with the dry polymer, it's liquid polyaluminum chloride, another chemical we use during the treatment process. Typically, we only get, I think, one bid for this. There's a pretty much sole, provider for this. It's Univar USA, sole, exactly, thank you. Sole source, Univar USA in Middletown, PA for 30,000 gallons more or less of liquid polyaluminum chloride at $332 per liquid ton. And again, it's another process chemical we use for the plant. Yeah, we advertise it, and they're the only game. Yeah.
Do we have a motion to approve that?
I'll move.
Mr. Burnell, we have a second for Mr. Bacon. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just wait. Sure.
Perhaps, folks, maybe we could take a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back to vote on these two items. It'll be a quick, brief 5-minute recess. Thank you.